recently, there was a controversy with one of the bigger PBMs around bulk purchases.
Yeah, Josh and I traded emails right when it happened, because we had about 40 pharmacies. The day the edit turned on, we probably had 40 pharmacies call us that were PioneerRx members saying, what's going on? What's this edit? We had written about this back in January, February. Caremark updates their provider manual every year, but they actually physically print it and mail it every other year. And so on the even years, it's a big to-do, and on the odd years, they just have amendments and updates. So typically on the odd years, there's not a lot going on with Caremark, but in the even years, it's a whole reprint. And so we had cautioned. There were several different updates, and one of them was the bulk purchasing restrictions and the concerns around those caveats. So I'm very familiar with the edits. I definitely had that as a hot topic to discuss or think about in terms of what does bulk purchasing mean? How do pharmacies need to navigate it? What does it really mean on an audit, right, Jeff? That's what pharmacies are kind of struggling to understand. And we're actually, as a result, even we put out a memo because we had so many pharmacies calling us and asking us about bulk purchases and not really understanding how Caremark does their auditing when it comes to invoice audits. Invoice audits are their own unique, difficult creature to navigate for pharmacies. And we can certainly dive into that a little bit and talk about why they're so complex and why pharmacies struggle. But, you know, the bulk purchasing requirements and then the update, right? So Caremark, there was a lot of industry backlash, which I think was great. Pharmacies and everyone was, the advocacy was there. And we've got a little movement in terms of Caremark. They rarely issue these mid-year updates. And right, so they issued a mid-year update, sent it out to pharmacies and said, hey, we understand that there's some concern in the industry. We're willing to make some concessions. One of the things that I found appalling from the very start, and I'm sure you guys are with me, but you know, this bulk purchasing request, not only the whole process in and of itself. If I have a valid invoice, that should be enough. Right? If I can be able to show invoices, that should be enough. But not only that, but in order to qualify for a bulk purchase, we want you to send us a letter in the U.S. mail. This is a $1 billion, entity. We want you to mail us 7 days in advance, and we will respond via mail. I mean, in today's world, the fact that they wouldn't even set up an email address in the first place, right, to say,
or an online
here's how
form.
we're going to handle this.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a portal. They have all those resources. They did it intentfully, right?
Yep.
They weren't interested in having to navigate and have a bunch of requests. They wanted to make it arduous and difficult for any independent owner to comply. And that's where I think they recognized maybe there's some wiggle room, and it provided some concessions to the process. We're actually, because of the confusion, Jeff, we're having a webinar. It's an open webinar for anyone, June 15th. Okay. And it's going to be like 45 minutes. We'll have it out on our social media, and it's for any independent pharmacy. We send it out.
We should post that on our system message.
Yeah, I would love to share it.
We would love to include that.
Yeah, because it's open to anyone, right? And it's really understanding what kind of purchases put me at risk for being in non-compliance, we'll say, with Caremark's bulk purchasing requirement. Really, the risk is predicated on several different factors. And so what we have done is kind of walk pharmacies through scenarios. Let's talk about what Caremark is to your business, right. What percent of your business, how are you bulk purchasing today? Let's say you're not bulk purchasing. And then what happens if you're spec buying 6 months worth of inventory, and how do these audits impact and change that? I think Caremark, rightfully so, struck out some of the language that created some of the confusion around 30 days, because they essentially define bulk purchasing as anything that lasts more than 30 days. And really, that was a poor decision by them. They obviously removed that. They struck it. It was in parentheses. They had, in other words, inventory that lasts more than 30 days. And that created a whole lot of issues and confusion for any pharmacy, because every CVS pharmacy has inventory that lasts 30 days, and they're not filing bulk purchase requirements.
And this was a situation where, so really what it said was, we've got this analysis period plus 30 days before the analysis period. Okay. And if the analysis period was a day, you'd have to have nothing that lasted more than 30 days. Now, what they say is, well, the analysis period is always a year by practice. So you're looking at a year plus a month that you had enough invoices to substantiate what you dispense. That can still be a problem. I have pharmacists who dispense something they bought 2 years ago because it's rarely used and still good. But there's a situation where, and lawyers do this all the time. Lawyers know they need X, and they write X plus infinity so that when it gets carved back a little bit, they're still in with what they want rather than saying exactly what they're trying to do. And the problem with, there's no real trust of PBMs. And the problem is when a person says, hey, I'm going to point a nuclear weapon at you, but I'm not really going to use it. It's only really for the bad guy, right? I'm going to use this other thing I have for the bad guy. And it's just hard. It's got to be carved back. And they're still in. And to the credit of the movement, Caremark is actually still working with the APHA on trying to get a FAQ out to further describe it. I think they made a lot of statements to a variety of people in here that will carve it back. They made a lot of statements to me that, hey, if there was a problem, they'd carve it back. They claim they're looking for fraud. They're looking for fake drugs. They're looking for things like that, but they're building this big threatening thing. And we've had pharmacists who were following it. Everything they bought other than 30 days, they sent an email to them and they said, stop. This isn't what we mean. Well, all this creates good evidence. And so I think it was super beneficial how the everybody has reacted, and including you guys and the help that you've provided there.
I totally agree, Jeff. And I think it's definitely a positive move in the direction. And to your point, right, my experience in working with attorneys, right, if they can be nebulous and capture everything, and even if they only want a small piece of it, they certainly will craft the language accordingly. So it's exactly that, talking about the scenarios, what kinds of things, what happens if you have dead inventory that sits on your shelf for 2 years. One of the things that pharmacies struggle to understand in relation to Caremark when they look at purchases over a time frame, and it traditionally is always 12 months, right? Doesn't mean can't change. We say typically or traditionally 12 months plus a month. So you got 13 months of purchases, 12 months of claims. One of the things for Caremark in particular is Caremark only looks at Caremark claims.
Right.
And so if they're 30% of your business, you only have to show
You'll have plenty
30%.
of purchases. Right.
You'll have plenty of purchases, but it depends on the drug, right? Every drug, you can't say 30% of the business across every single NDC because they may prefer Ventolin over ProAir and Proventil, which means they're 70% of your Ventolin purchases. And now you spec bought Ventolin because you had a great opportunity and you bought 6 months supply, and you can run into an issue. And it's kind of understanding those kinds of parameters of when would a bulk purchase really constitute a potential problem for me in a traditional sense, and can pharmacies really navigate that to the NDC level? I mean, they can't, right? I mean, you have in a typical pharmacy 3,000 plus NDCs, and they're always changing and they're modifying, and having to understand those things and navigate that, and what's the real audit risk to an individual pharmacy so that we can educate them and help them feel prepared in the event, but also the advocacy piece, right? There's a lot of state movement, both at individual state levels, both from Webby and Rutledge decisions that have occurred, as you guys well know, and certainly NCPA. And so leveraging the advocacy standpoint as well, the better you understand how PBMs are constraining your business, the better you can advocate successfully at the state and federal level for what things are happening to your pharmacy and what things really need to change, and whether that's state regulations or otherwise to be successful.